ISP is proudly supported by BCW Supplies. Yeah, all my cards, they fit snugly into a perfect fit, and then we slide them right into an Elite 2 sleeve. Those cards, hey, well, they're resting easy and protected in my Deck Vault 100. Ooh, it's a nice one. Well, all of my spiciest gems, well, they're on display in my Z Folio LX. Yeah, you could treat your collection with love by going to bcwsupplies.com. Use the code ISP10. Get 10% off all of your orders. Oh, yeah. And hey, maybe cards might not be your only thing. Are you into coins, comics? Maybe you want to show off your record collection? They've got you covered. Use the code ISP10 at checkout for 10% off your BCW Supplies purchases. BCW Supplies. Protect, store, display.
Hi, this is patron supporter Rich, aka the Polish Guy, and you're listening to the Instant Speed Podcast on 983 Media.
This is the Instant Speed Podcast, episode number 76. Our guest today is going to be Brodie Spurlock, the Kid Wonder Bread. And as always, this episode is brought to you by FAB Cards. Go to kfabecards.com. All right, before we get to the guest, why don't we talk about the news and all the facts, starting with the fact that the Realm Games, in partnership with MinMax Games, had their first big brawl as part of the big Realm circuit, and it was a resounding success. Players from all over came and culminated out there in Chicago to throw down and try out the new cards. Outsiders, the first major tournament with the cards being legal, frankly, fresh 24 hours just in the CC legality, and we had wonderful time there out in Chicago. Myself, DM Armada, and Charmer called the action, but ultimately it was won by our guest, that being Brodie Spurlock versus Levi Rauch in the finals, and it was an Azalea versus Azalea mirror match. What a time we had over there. You guys want to go check the VODs, check out DM Armada's YouTube page to go ahead and go and backtrack and catch all the fun. It was a hoot of a time, and the gameplay was real tight and awesome. So go check that out. Beyond that, hey, well, we've got the Battle Hardened in Richmond coming up from April 14th to 16th. So that is another big tournament that is coming around the bend. So if you're looking for more action ahead of the Pro Tour, which is happening at the end of April, you want to go take a look at this, because it's your next giant snapshot of what precisely is going on in Quebec, in competitive flesh and blood. All right, besides that, well, we have all seen the pictures, the photos, the rumors. They are true. Oh yes, they are true. All of it is that there are some God boxes, I call them juiced boxes, out there regarding the collation issue that happened, because we've seen boxes open with 14, 15 legendary cards. The TLDR here, friends, is that, well, there was, for the better part of about 30 minutes or so of collation, the legendary sheets were funneled through the common seeding thing. So the easiest way to describe this is that legendaries, rainbow foil specifically, were seeded as commons in what has essentially accounted for approximately 0.4 to 0.8% of the boxes or cases that were printed. That is the truth. So 0.4% of the Belgian print run cards, or boxes rather, are absolutely juiced to the nines. So what is the implications of this? Who knows? Long story short, LSS has gone on the record and said precisely what has happened. They've been very transparent about it. You can go to fabtcg.com to basically dig into all of this stuff. All right, beyond that, we got Brodie Spurlock on the program this week to talk about a whole bunch of cool stuff about what happened this weekend. His matchup in the finals against Levi, pivoting to Azalea really late, beating Michael Hamilton twice, plus his career. He's a young man. He's got years and years of competitive gameplay ahead of him, but what are his plans? We dig into that on this episode of Instant Speed. This episode of Instant Speed Podcast is brought to you by FAB Cards. Located in Utah, FAB Cards is a smart choice for all of your flesh and blood needs. Prepare for the battles you'll face through the world of Wraith by gearing up at kfabecards.com. That's KAYFABECARDS.com. and get all of the cards shipped directly to your door. Hey, if Magic or Pokemon is your jam, they've got you covered. Kayfabe Cards has a plethora of TCG options, sealed products, and singles to keep you collecting and keep you competitive. Kayfabe Cards, be who you want to be. The Instant Speed Podcast welcomes the Giant Slayer himself. He is the winner of the Realm Games Brawl in Chicago. I have to consult my notes here, Brodie, because there's so many. I asked you for your accolades and your all of your wins, and then it took me 17 minutes to type them all down. So bear with me, buddy. We're gonna get through this. All right, here we go. He's one of the most dangerous players in the game. His accolades include 6 ProQuest wins, 3 Road to National wins, 4 skirmish wins, 6 battle-hardened top 8s, including 1 win, 3 PTI tournament wins, a top 8 at USA Nationals, 31st at Pro Tour Lille, 23rd at Worlds, and a partridge in a pear tree. Welcome to Instant Speed Podcast. The kid Wonder Bread himself, the Giant Slayer, Brodie Spurlock. Hi, Brodie.
What's up, Flake? Thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome, dude. It is always a big joy to see you at any particular event. I have basically adopted you as my protectorate. You are now under my protection in all forms and what that means, I have no idea. But good people deserve good things, and frankly, I just read off all these accolades, that is, to me, one of the testaments in the world that good things happen to good people, because you are not just a rising star, you are a star, man, and it's good to see you succeed the way you do.
Yeah, it's always a ton of fun seeing you at these big events and catching up. We usually get to hang out at this point, every month or two, we get to catch up at one of these events. It's always cool to see everyone, and it's a fun time.
Yeah, that's what it's kind of come to, right? These events have become almost less like the actual tournament scene where you go and you grind and you go back to your hotel and you agonize or you celebrate or whatnot. It's more so become a family gathering, a reunion to a degree, where the card gaming and such is almost the sideshow to everything else, where we want to do the drafting in the lobby of the hotel until they kick us out. We want to go out for dinner. We want to laugh and do this and do that and have a good time. But we also be well, there's almost a certain degree where we are enjoying ourselves and somebody has to be the bearer of bad news and say dude, we got to be at the venue at 9 a.m. It's almost we have to, we have to go to the event that we're all here for. Darn, it almost becomes the worst part of everything. And obviously it's not. Do you feel like these events have turned the corner to a degree where the majority of the people that are there are, it's like family, it's like a friend reunion to a degree?
100%. I think it's probably the thing that everyone looks forward to the most. It's one of my favorite things about specifically the FAB community. I feel like we're all just everyone's so friendly, and in the past, at this point, almost year and a half, I've gotten to know so many friends, and that's one of the most exciting things about anytime I travel. I know I'm going to get to see these people that I only really get to catch up with when there's a bigger event, because they live pretty far from me. But then once every month or so, we're all magically in the same place again, on some different place around the country or around the world. Yeah, absolutely. Getting to be a part of this community is one of the most special things. And I agree with you that as much as we prep for the tournaments and are excited about the tournaments, the most special parts of the weekends tend to be the evenings, before and after, just hanging out with everyone.
They're great. They're definitely what I look forward to, and talking about these kinds of things. And sometimes it's heartbreaking. It's what hotel are you at, or where are you staying? And it's oh, this person's a mile off of this. It's kind of heartbreaking where you don't get to just have every waking moment to hang out and be around each other. But I can confidently say that the friends I've made within this game and the ones that I see at all these tournaments, I see them infinitely more than the friends that I've been in their wedding parties, that I've given speeches at their weddings. I've been there to meet their kids that they've had and such like that. Friends that I've had for 30 years, I see them so much less than I see, the friends I've made here. And there is always some sort of apprehension when you at least for my perspective, because this is also a career for me, and it might actually be a career for you as well, to play cards and earn a living doing this. But for me, it's kind of like, how close do I want to get to what kind of feels like it's a job for me. It's what pays the bills. And I've had other jobs before where I've honestly kind of actively avoided making those kinds of relationships. But here it's different, because I feel like when I'm here, your job is to play the cards, my job is to do this, but we're still all here for the same reason, which is to enjoy the game. Was there any reluctance, do you find, like, at least from your perspective, where you want to separate your card gaming career from your social life to a degree? Like, is there any apprehension on your level where you're saying, well, this is, these are friends, sure, they're acquaintances, they're colleagues and whatnot, but like, I have my friends. Like, do you draw that line, or has that all just blurred?
Honestly, for me, I love that the two things like mesh together as much as they do. I try to like become friends with the people I play cards with, and I try to get my existing friends into cards. So like mostly, for me, they're one and the same. I definitely think there's an interesting balance, like you said, when it also becomes work, and like that line of, I mean, mostly it's a good thing, right? Like if you're, you know, getting paid to do something you love and hang out with people you love to be around, like, yeah, it's just all good. I think the more like people I can get into card gaming, and the more I can get to know people in card gaming, the happier I am.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm really, really lucky, and I've put in a lot of hard work to get where I'm at. But ultimately, people say like, how do you, like, the pay is what it is. It's great, and I'm happy with it. It allows me to pay my bills. But people are like, how do you go on, like, how do you afford to go on vacation or go do this and like have hobbies? I said, I am one of the very few in the world who's lucky enough to say that my career is my hobby at the same time. So I'm never lacking where I'm like, damn, if I should chase the money so I can go and play cards. My career is to play cards and to be around that. So it's a good feeling. And I know that a lot of people are not that lucky, but for those who are, it's a great feeling indeed. We just came back from Chicago, the Brawl put on by Realm Games. This was sort of the first leg of what their grander vision is. They partnered with MinMax Games, two really awesome entities out there. What was your impression on the whole of this? Where did you kind of rank this tournament in terms of against something like, let's say, the level of what a PQ might be, what a level of like a Battle Hardened to Calling, etc.? You've played in all of these tiers of tournaments. We just had things like pre-release, which are kind of on the lower end of the spectrum, and you've won Battle Hardens. You've had that kind of success. Where would you rank this tournament?
I think in terms of competitiveness, at least in a vacuum, it's very similar to like a Battle Hardened. Um, in that this event actually technically was a professional tournament invitational, which is what usually runs on the Sundays when they have Battle Hardens, which is very similar to a Battle Harden, but only first place gets the PTI instead of first and second. But then, of course, there's also the 5K prize pool. So as far as like prizing and like size of the event, I would say very comparable to the Battle Harden series. But this event in particular, I felt like was very stacked. We had so many like known names in the field and like great players in attendance. I'm not sure what it was, just like the location or the hype around it brought a lot of very great players out, and it was fun to like get to compete in such a stacked field.
Yeah, that was what kind of surprised me. Like I not to sort of not trust that the Realm and MinMax were going to put on a big show, but I was suspicious that there might not be the same type of level of attraction of Battle Hardened, because there is no direct LSS involvement to that degree. And when I started looking at the people showing up, and it was kind of just filtering through, I was like, oh, okay, like Logan's going to be there, and I'm going to be there with Armada and Charmer to do the casting, and there's going to be some locals obviously around the area who are obviously going to be there. But then I started hearing of the people who are, the Canadians, for example, when I was at the pre-release, and some of them like, are you going to be there? I said, yeah, I'm going to be there. And they're like, oh, I'll see you there. I was like, oh, really? That's freaking awesome. And they were loading up cars. People like Yuki Lee Bender flying from Vancouver to Toronto to hop in that car to drive to Chicago. Like, it's just so awesome to see Michael Hamilton there, Daniel Rutkowski there, Levi obviously there, and just a plethora of other names. I think it could have actually been bigger. It was just up against Battle Spirit Saga's enormous tournament that a lot of people went to. Do you think that the future of competitive card gaming do you think tournaments like these, community run and driven tournaments, are going to continue to push against things like Battle Hardens? Do you think that it'll always be a notch below, or in your mind, Brodie, is this just another flavor of like a Battle Hardened?
My hope is that it's kind of the latter, and that it's not pushing against the other series, but really just adding to them. I think there's like, at least the way OP is currently run, there are enough weekends in a year for someone like me who tries to attend everything I can to go to all of the like official LSS Battle Hardens and also attend events like this. And like the Realm Games is the first, along with I believe Arcane Games and events. Those are the first two entities to kind of start their own competitive circuit in FAB with like a qualification system and everything. And I think the more of those we have, the better. At some point, of course, it'll start to conflict. Like if a billion people try to do it, then there are only so many weekends in a year. But ultimately, I think that the two, like being LSS and privately run circuits, can definitely coexist and are good for each other.
That's the trouble here, is the fact that like you said, there's so many weekends in a year, but ultimately that is a finite amount. And the problem I find is when these weekends are going to be fought over by other entities. The best thing that I heard, and because not to say that I was skeptical about this entire thing, but the idea was first kind of approached to me. I think it was like at Worlds where Keith approached me. He's like, I got an idea. And I was like, lay it on me, son. Like let's hear it. And to show up to this event after all this idea started snowballing and there's bigger ideas. And the problem is when there's a competition amidst the community and the LGSs and the entities that want to put this stuff on. So what I'm so happy to hear is not just that LSS was kind of involved to the degree where they're saying like, okay, these weekends are free. We don't have any, dominion over these particular weekends. You can put your stuff here and you're not coming up against us. So they were involved to sort of facilitate that there was no conflict in that regard. But the other thing that really made this awesome is that it wasn't a matter of Realm saying, I need to get locked down this weekend so that Min-Max doesn't get it or that Green Tree doesn't get it. It was, we're going to work together so that we can all see this through and see this successfully. And I don't know, like you said that Flesh and Blood was your first ever card game, right?
I actually used to play Magic before.
Okay, so in the Magic sphere, that's perfect, because in the Magic sphere, I don't have much experience in it, but I know that there was maybe I just don't see the full picture, but I always felt like there was a lot more like a competitive sort of friction that existed. Did you feel that when you played Magic, that there was community-based tournaments almost don't even exist, even on like specifically on the circuit, on the circuit scale? Do you think that Flesh and Blood is unique in that sense that they're working together, or have you seen this kind of collaboration in Magic?
I haven't really, at least in my experience, seen this kind of thing in the past where two like major companies within a game will work together to put something like the 5K on. And I really loved that they were doing it together. I think like the two companies working together and like combined, just like combining their resources to make the event twice as good is something I definitely like to see more of in the future. And yeah, at the time I was playing Magic, I hadn't gotten super into competition with it. Right as I was starting to, that was when COVID hit. But at least in my experience, it's not something that we've seen a lot of in the past.
Brilliant. Well, the Brawl was a huge success on many different ways. I think it was ran smoothly for the most part. I mean, I don't think that there was any hiccups. There was no gigantic controversies and such. But I think that the biggest talking point, frankly, was a double Azalea final. It was a mirror match between yourself and Levi Rauch, who, frankly, by all accounts, is the flag bearer for Azalea. Everybody has, or every hero kind of has their chosen champion to herald that particular hero. We have people like Ethan Van Sant, who has been brilliant, sort of waving the flag for Levia. We have Levi Rauch, who has done exceptional job, beating that drum and before Outsiders came out. The questions that I've fielded the most from the community are from people like, I'm going to pronounce this terribly. I apologize. Krivno Rixius. I apologize if I did that incorrectly, as well as TCG Talk, both kind of asking the same question, which is, how did you land on Azalea as a choice? Where, for example, Kriv saying, why not try a new Briar or Viserai list, which you might be a little bit more familiar with and comfortable with, whereas TCG Talk saying, hey, how did you go from something like Icelander or Briar that you've played so much to something like Azalea that you probably have, maybe a dozen reps on moving into this tournament, so to speak. So can you talk us through the decision to land on Azalea? People suspected that it was going to be good, but how did you, hammer that in?
It was a bit of a wild process for me. The week before, we had been testing all kinds of different decks, and I had played some games on Azalea, but the main thing that actually pushed me off of the deck initially was the experience playing the mirror. I felt like it was like a little bit too high rolly and crazy and unpredictable, and I didn't love like the feeling of it. And at the time, I felt like there were enough other comparable decks that I just didn't want to have to deal with that because I expected a lot of Azaleas. So I tested several decks, and then Friday morning I was actually 90% locked to play Icelander. And I told my team in our meeting, like, I think I said 94% locked to just bring Icelander this weekend. Something crazy would have to happen to change my mind. And then nothing crazy really happened. I just like sat alone for an hour and a half thinking about it, like going through basically just like battling with my own brain, thinking about all the heroes matchups, because this tournament was one of the hardest for me to figure out what I wanted to play. And basically I felt so like unsure about which deck had the best odds to win, and like there were too many conflicting factors and ultimately just not enough data to decide. So I decided to just make the like kind of YOLO decision and play Azalea. I felt like I had enough practice that week to at least understand how to sequence it. And a part of me felt like if I didn't play Azalea, then I might look back in a week and regret it, because I felt like there was a chance it was just the most powerful deck in the room. So yeah, pretty much just like indecision led me to go with let's play the new thing and see how it goes.
I like how you mentioned YOLO as the decision to take the hero, because that's to a degree almost how the entire tournament ended, and we'll get to that shortly. But the one of the best things I read the entire trip was as they were posting the top 8 on Reddit. And again, I think I mentioned this. I mentioned this on the stream, so I'm not taking credit for this comment. If you are the person who commented on this on Reddit, please let me know in the YouTube so I can give you the proper respect. But someone posted the top 8 and all the the finals there, and somebody commented, the most surprising thing about this weekend is not that Azalea is the first seed, it's that someone took a game off of Michael Hamilton. And I think that is a fair statement, because this kid has been bulletproof. I say kid, but you know what I mean. Like, he's been bulletproof for the entire calendar year, practically since Worlds. We don't know when the last time this guy lost a ranked game in Classic Constructed. He seems to be this behemoth of a presence. Like, just sitting across from him is in itself a disadvantage, because he gets into your mind. Now, you went on there on a brand new hero against Michael Hamilton with his bread and butter Icelander and won the game on camera with all that stress and all that buzz around it. So talk to us a little bit about what it's like to play against Michael Hamilton. And, let's be real here. It wasn't the cleanest game that you played. You were the first to admit that, for sure. But walk us through that match, that first match where you're playing against the best player in the world on a brand new hero. Like, nothing felt like it was aligning properly. So walk us through that match a little bit.
So I definitely understand when people play against known strong players, the feeling of nerves and like the expectation that you're unfavored going in and all those things. But something that I work very hard on in Flesh and Blood is to keep my mental state in check and like not let any stressful factors get to me. So anytime I play against a really strong player like that, I try to look at it as just an exciting opportunity to play like a really great game where I know that my opponent's going to be playing really tight. So I also have to play tight if I want to win. And like, I'm really going to get to see the matchup play out at a high level because I know that they're probably not going to make mistakes. And I just try to look at it like that, like from like an excited, like we're going to play a great game perspective. Because I think if you let it get in your head too much that they're really good at the game, it can actually lead you to make worse plays, like start playing not to lose instead of playing to win. But yeah, so basically it was just fun for me to get to play against Michael Hamilton. It's the first time I've gotten to play against him in a tournament. And like you said, I made a couple silly mistakes that match. But really I was just trying to stay as level-headed as possible and enjoy the experience. The match was a little bit crazy. That Swiss match was probably the most like back and forth match I played all weekend in terms of big moments. Like he had several turns where he just like totally blew me out and like stopped 11 damage or whatever with one card. And then I had a couple huge arrows with on hits. It was a very exciting game. And thankfully I was able to close it out in the end with just enough like raw force with the Azalea deck giving me the like pumps and on hits I needed.
It was a great match to watch, and we were treated to the rematch as well, which was the I believe it was the semifinals of the entire thing. Now this game, this game is what I call a caster's nightmare, not because the gameplay was bad, but because it was one hell of a freaking marathon, to say the least. It went beyond the 50 minutes. In fact, it was twice as long. I think the game clocked in at about an hour and 40 minutes or so at the end of the day, which is in itself challenging for me, but I don't want to, I just got to sit there and run my mouth for an hour and 40 minutes, which frankly, I have a lot of experience doing. Not a problem, especially when I'm flanked by two awesome people. But there was a lot of fun stuff that occurred in that match, which culminated into the famed and fabled PP pause, which again, an hour into the match, totally understandable. Totally understandable. Somebody in chat, and I apologize for not knowing, for forgetting who said this, but somebody said, in Germany, it's called pee-pee pause when you guys got up and went to the bathroom. After the fact, did you rewatch that match and the absolute train wreck of a broadcast that we brought to you? Like, do you ever rewatch these matches that are so unique in that regard?
I do often rewatch any of my streamed games, mostly just to try to like improve on my play from them. I haven't gotten a chance to watch back any of those top 8 games yet, but I definitely am going to. I look forward to, especially now, seeing all of the craziness that went down.
So just to give people context, so I at a certain point, I was like saying, okay, like you guys were agonizing over some plays, and rightfully so. There's humongous things there's a huge prize at stake here. But I was at one point, I was like, all right, here are a list of movies that we could have watched into their completion by the time you played your first card to where we are now. Because it was like we passed the 90-minute mark, and I was like, here are some movies that are 90 minutes or less. And I'm just rattling them off. And we're having a good time, and it's fun. And we're doing all that. But then I realized that the length of your match was longer than my flight from Chicago to Toronto. Like from the point we pushed back to the point we hit the gate to gate was shorter than your match. Like, do you understand that? Like it was incredible. And I want to ask you specifically, when it comes to matches like this, these, you get past the 20-minute mark, the 30-minute mark, the hour mark. How do you maintain your focus when you've gone through your 4th cycle or such, or through your deck, and these agonizing decisions become so taxing on you?
First of all, that's hilarious that the match was longer than your entire flight. I think with these really long games, or just long days of playing in general, part of what helps me stay focused and like able to continue just searching for the right line and hopefully finding it most of the time is just like an excitement for the game. That sounds kind of cheesy almost, but like I'm so genuinely like enjoying myself when I'm playing Flesh and Blood and excited to try to figure out what the right play is. Like it's all just a puzzle. So I think I kind of have this like adrenaline rush anytime I'm playing that just keeps me alive all the way until I know it's the last round of the day, and then usually I crash pretty hard after that and feel tired. But yeah, in that particular match, honestly, the PP pause was actually a kind of a nice mental break. Just to we got like so deep in it, and just to kind of like stand up for a second. Um, it was like a nice reset. It was also funny. This is the first time I've ever been escorted to a bathroom. um the judges had to it makes sense, right? Because since the game's on stream, they just want to do everything by the book and make sure there's no like potential funny business going on, so they have to send a judge with you to the bathroom to make sure you're not like talking to anyone. But it was like that was a funny just like experience to be escorted down the hall to the bathroom like that.
I like it how it's like you had an escort to make sure that you're not talking to anybody and no one talks to you. Wherein I wish I had that when I go to the bathroom. Like when I go to the bathroom, the one thing I don't want is for people to like start talking to me while I'm peeing. I like, we'll talk after. Like as soon as I wash my hands, I'm fair game. But just please don't talk to me while I'm peeing. It's incredible because, like, just as a side note, I don't know if you heard some of the controversy of what happened in at the Battle Spirit Saga tournament, where poor Tyler Horsepool. And I totally commiserate with him because when I play, I get so nervous that I'll have 1 or 2 coffees and then I have to pee like crazy, like between every round. And like, it sucks. So poor Tyler, called the judge to go to the bathroom and they denied him. They're like, yeah, you're going to lose your match if you go. And he what a tragic thing to have to endure. And your match, which was untimed, thank God that they were human enough to do that. And I understand like the safeguards of going to the bathroom or whatever. It's the right protocol, because even though no one would ever suspect you or Michael Hamilton of cheating, it's just you got to treat everyone the same way. But that game, you finally come back and you guys played so cleanly, so to the letter, and making sure you're not giving an inch. But it ended in a quite the spectacular way, because as we were broadcasting this, and as Armada and Charmer and I were kind of parsing through how this could attain an end game, all the equipment more or less was all gone. You didn't have to worry about Storm Striders. I think you had peeled away his arsenal, and you had clearance to land essentially. But it wasn't. You had a side wind that was gonna turn you around like a top. Like it wasn't safe. It wasn't calm seas. You had to sort of do a move where it could have gone either way. So it ended with potentially a Azalea YOLO. Now talk us through that last turn and how you eventually came to the decision to make the play that you did. Talk us about the risks, the uncertainty around it. And ultimately, that mantra that you mentioned to me, that sort of game plan that you mentioned on broadcast, that I don't want to say, I want you to say it, but you know what I'm talking about. So talk us through it.
Are we talking about the finals match? I just want to clarify before I dive into it.
Oh, right. So we're talking about the finals match. That's my bad, because it was against Levi Rauch, and my apologies again. That match was like 4 hours long, so everything kind of blends together. You beat Michael Hamilton, and you move on to the finals against Levi Rauch, who is essentially, like I said, the flag bearer. He is the head priest of the cult of Azalea, as it were. And it comes to that. Culmination. I apologize. Yeah, again, it was just such a confusing thing for me. It was against him. All the equipment more or less is gone. You come to this move where I'm going to put this away, but it's not a sure thing. Talk us through that last matchup. That last play.
Yeah, so it was a crazy situation. I had my Snapdragon scalers were gone. When he attacked me for, I believe, 12 damage, I was at 3, he was at 1. I want to say there was a Blood Rot Pox token on hit. No, it was not. I think it was a Nurse or something. It was not Blood Rot. But basically, I had to block at least 10 damage just to live. And I had my Bullseye Bracers, my Tunic, and my Skullbone Crosswrap still up. Tunic was on 1, so there's no way I could use the resource. And my Arsenal was a Premeditate, and my hand was 4 1-cost arrows. So what I ended up doing was blocking with 3 of the 1-cost 3 blocks, as well as the Tunic to block 10, take 2, go down to exactly 1, and then all I had left on my own turn was 1 blue Spire sniping in hand, the Premeditate and Arsenal, and of course the 2 equipment that both played a key role in this turn. So while deciding blocks, I felt like it was basically the only reasonable play was to block with those 3 cards and Tunic, because I honestly felt behind at this point. Tempo-wise, ignoring Dominate, Levi was ahead of me, so I felt like I had to dominate an arrow on my coming turn in order to win the game, and if I didn't, I was going to lose the finals. So I kept the 1 card in hand. When we got to my turn, the first thing I did was turn the Premeditate face up with the Cross Wrap to opt, and I saw some non-arrow card, or I think it maybe was, I don't remember what the card was, but it was definitely not a hit. It was not something that was going to win the game, so I shipped it to the bottom. And then at that point, I had 2 possible lines, and I thought for a very long time deciding between them. The first was just to blind Azalea right away, and if I hit a 1-cost arrow, I can fire for 5 Dominate, Levi can only block 4, and I win. Or if I hit a drill shot, I can actually put an aim counter on it with the blue that I'm holding in hand using Crow's Nest, so that his Cross Wrap can't block, and then he can only block 3 and I win. But both of those plays get stopped by Sink Below, which he had played 1 against me so far. And then the alternative line was to go ahead and play the Premeditate, bullseye the Spire sniping into Arsenal, and look at the top 2 cards and hope that one of them is exactly a 0-cost arrow that I can Azalea in and dominate for the win. And most of the time spent on that turn was me just trying to remember my exact deck list and like the number of arrows I had. So I am kind of new to the Azalea deck, so I didn't even remember like what the ratios were, how many pumps were in my deck, how many arrows were in my deck. So I was looking at my own graveyard and actually Levi's graveyard too, both of them just to try to put together what my own deck was, because my main deck is very much based on his Azalea list. And eventually I came to the conclusion that it was definitely mathematically better to go for the 0-cost. So after a long time thinking, I played the Premeditate out from Arsenal, popped the arms, put the Spire sniping in, and then I picked up the cards one at a time. The first one was a Lace with Blood Rot, which is like a total whiff in the situation. And I just kind of sighed and set it on the table. And then I did like the, wind up, rip the top, and it was a yellow Bolton shot. And that was it. I put them back. I like looked at the card again to make sure it was the yellow Bolton shot. And then I Azalea'd it in, fired for 6 Dominate, and I just barely managed to get there.
Now, part of this was like at that last turn, obviously it's the game's on the line, and you told me something about your approach to the game, because we were there discussing how you can approach it. And we're talking about like, well, you know what, like you can play a big arrow, not dominated. It's safer in terms of reliability. You might get some cards out of Levi, but if he sends 1 arrow dominated, like the game's over, and you don't know what he has and whatnot. So ultimately, you made the decision that, and what you told me, I want you to say it because you're the one who told me this. Your mentality approaching it of when it comes to making one decision over the other, there's an overlying kind of motivation to how you make that decision. Do you remember what you told me?
Was it that you have to play to win and not play not to lose?
That's right. That's the one. And like I think that makes sense, because the safest bet might be, like you're playing the odds of like I have an 80% chance of or like I have a 100% chance of doing something good that he can survive, and maybe I get another turn, but I have a 40% chance of outright winning here. How often, like, does that just kind of dictate your mentality going into all of your games and all of your turns? Or is there some sort of golden ratio that you say like, well, you know what, it's a 10% chance to win, but a 100% chance to find another turn versus, like when does that sort of percentage, how far apart do they have to be for you to take the safe play versus the roll the dice for the win?
I think this is one of the hardest things in Flesh and Blood, and it's you can't just apply easy math to it, because a lot of decisions in the game can be broken down to math, and this becomes like deep percentage chance like stuff where you have to think about all the possible 4-card combinations off the tops of both of your decks. And most of the time in a situation like that, I think you have to consider your own deck, your opponent's deck. I often spend a long time thinking through, like, depending on the matchup, like the average block value that they're going to be able to draw, how much damage they can do with an X card hand. But I feel like more often than not in these really close situations, it ends up being correct to just go for it. Say either like they don't have it, they have to not have it for me to win, or like if it's something like the Azalea situation where you're ripping off the top of your own deck, you just be like, I have to have it right now. Um, Even though you could argue that it's not the safe play, it ends up being the highest chance to win, and you have to just risk it and go for it and be like, this ends right now, one way or the other. That's not always the case, but as like a very general heuristic, I think a lot of times when you're placed in those situations, the uh, emotionally scarier choice ends up being the correct one, which is just like, let's flip it off the top and send me the bill.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. Is like the fact that it does get emotional because you know that the consequences of whiffing here are not just perhaps losing the game or losing the turn, but it does attack your psyche to a degree where you say you step back, you're like, damn it, I shouldn't have done that. Like, why am I so stupid? And it's a difficult spiral to get back in check and to put back on the rails, because I have done that before, and I still agonize over the first ever Canadian PQ. I top aided miraculously, and my first game was against David Rude, who I did not know. I had never met prior to that day, and I had an opportunity to beat him, but I made a boneheaded mistake. All I needed to do, it was limited, and all I needed to do was dominate Alexi Arrow and win the game. But I accidentally arsenaled that arrow instead of just holding onto it. And and then when I fired it, he just blocked it out. And those are the kinds of things that you have to leave in the past that I find. But those kinds of those decisions, and like that for me was a mistake. Like that was me making a mistake. For you, how do you reconcile when you actively make a choice, you weigh your options, you make a choice that ends up being the wrong choice, let's say? Do you have strategies on how to overcome that? And it's easy to say you just leave it in the past and you move on. You have so much success already that games that you've played that you've probably made bad decisions from, you just leave them in the past, you learn from them, you move on. But some players who get close and then, fail because of a decision they make, they carry that baggage for a long time. Like, do you have strategies that you employ to move past those kinds of pitfalls?
I think it's definitely really easy to let it weigh on you. And it's something that I struggled with and have worked on a lot. I think as far as later rounds in the same day, like if it happens in round 3 of a tournament and I still have 4 or whatever, 10 rounds to play, I convince my brain that it didn't happen. I'm like, I lost to high roll. I didn't make any, like, it's just gone. Because I can't afford to be thinking about it. So I just like put it out of my mind until the tournament's over. And then at least for me, once the event is over, I undo all those brain tricks and I go and actually try to analyze what happened. And I think it's important to let yourself just process it. And it's okay to be upset that you made a mistake or whatever went wrong in a game, like to just feel the emotion that comes with that, because it can be really hard to accept and process. And I try to let myself feel it for a day, learn everything I can from it, and then my mentality has been the next morning, as long as I've done everything I can to learn from it and make sure it doesn't happen in the future, then I'm over it. And I know that by letting it go, I will probably win one more game in the next tournament I play than I would have if I kept thinking about it. So I just go back to practice and I'm like, instead of wallowing on that more, I'm going to learn something new that'll help me win the next turn, or like do well at the next tournament. And I just like that's my cutoff, is I think about it for the rest of the day, try to process it before I go to the bed, and then the next morning it's gone.
It's a very mature approach and something that I've struggled with and have only recently kind of overcome it. And part of it is because I don't have the same stakes as many other players do. I play in the odd tournament maybe a few times a year, or like the big stakes tournament, not because I anticipate I'm going to win, but I do put the work in, and it still sucks when you make an idiot play or a stupid mistake, or you came so close. And the difference is, for me, it's like, okay, like who cares? Like no one had money on me, or I was never a horse in the race, as it were, but it's fun to do that. And I think that it's very wise what you say, is that at the particular time, you can't let that ruin your next match that you cannot avoid, but you can go in and acknowledge it and kind of honor that feeling. Like that feeling exists. And I think that this is a problem that a lot of people do is they say, just move past it. But if you're moving past it, you're not acknowledging it and you're not learning from it. And I think that if you can grow from mistakes, then like you said, they are no longer going to be as scary and they're no longer going to be as surprising when they do occur because you'll have been there. And I say this like, at the end of my show, you're not losing if you're learning. And if you're learning from that, that's fine. But I think that you're right. You can't let it sit on your shoulder and squawk in your ear that particular day. But if you don't put it to bed and you don't put it to rest, then it'll never go away. So
Yeah.
I think that it's definitely wise advice for players out there who struggle with that, who carry those mistakes with them a lot. Like, you can't be shackled to those things. But if you don't actually acknowledge it and pick that lock to remove those weights, like you're never going to get beyond it.
Yeah. And one last piece of advice. I think it is important to wait till the tournament's over, but something that I find helpful is writing it down. Anytime I just like can't get over a loss or I'm very frustrated by something, if I can just find one thing that I learned from it to change in the future, and I have a list, I write it down, things to keep in mind for future tournaments, whether it's play on a particular deck or just a general like approach to playing tournaments. Finding that one thing and writing it down on paper kind of helps me mentally process it and put it to rest.
So just to give some dap here to Momo Shiki at it's Damien57 on Twitter, who also wanted to sort of ask you about that last play and making those decisions and such. One went through your head, so props to Momo for that submission. So thank you so much. The other thing that came out of this weekend is some very awesome memes and some very awesome Photoshop jobs that people have made out. Again, you are kind of like Flesh and Blood's mascot to a degree. Like everybody adores you, and the things that emerge from seeing Brodie at a tournament, being you walking through the halls with your sandwich in tow or your bag of sandwich meats and like things like that. Like it's just great, and we all love to do it, but you embrace it as well, and you're such a good sport about it because every time I'm like, oh Brodie, take a picture with your sandwich or do this or whatever, you actually wanted to do your final interview while just demolishing a ham sandwich. Like it was just so good. You had it ready to go. It is like it's your calling card. Like I suspect that the next time that you beat somebody or you win a tournament, it's like you just put the half-eaten sandwich on their chest while they're like unconscious on the floor. Be like, better luck next time, buddy. And then you move on. Like kind of like that move. But did you have a favorite meme? I'm going to put some up on the screen for everybody who's watching, some of my favorite ones so people can kind of get an idea. But you saw a bunch. You even chose some of the ones you like and whatever. But like, how do you feel about these memes? Are you embracing them? Do you have any favorites that you've seen?
I think they're really funny. It was like one of the funniest parts of the weekend for me was just like scrolling through that one thread of the captions. I think the thing that made me laugh the most was the urgent delivery altar. It just fits so well with that picture.
Yeah, that one was great. There was the one about the where you're like an Uber Eats delivery person bringing it up to Regicide and just being like, "Oh, you're Uber Eats." Oh my god! And then just like running away. There was that one. There was
yeah, I saw that too.
Pee-pee run was good. There was also the pee-pee pause, which was like Sand Sketch Plans, and you just saying, "Hurry, you gotta go." Like there's so much joy to be had there. I'm glad that you're a part of it. And now we're going to sort of close out the tournament scene to a degree to talk a little bit about what the meta is going to look like. This is the first kind of big snapshot of what the pros are playing with the new cards. Outsiders was frankly just like 24 hours old in terms of legality when it comes down to it. And the first rendition, the first wave of meta decks, as it were, made it to the tournament, and the finals, the top 8 rather, were 7 different heroes. Did you have a snapshot in your mind of what the tournament might look like? And now that it's complete, do you kind of have a better idea of the direction in which it's going?
I wasn't sure going in. The meta was more or less what I expected, except for Katsu. I definitely expected to see more Katsus there just because he had also just gotten a ton of new cards. And I believe there was a reasonable amount. I think there were 7, and Dromai was the most played deck at 15. So like definitely a solid number, but Katsu and Riptide slightly less represented than I expected. I thought that there would just be more like hype, YOLO, let's try it. But yeah, I think that as far as like how the day played out in the top 8, it's more or less what I expected. I was impressed to see both Briar and Dash make it in. Um, in the field of new heroes, I felt like they had. I suspected that they might fall behind a little bit with all the Rangers running around. Um, I'm not really sure at all what Dash's matchups look like into the new field. I got to play against one Dash in the Swiss as Azalea, and it was a very interesting game. And I'm like curious to test that more now. But definitely Azalea was kind of like the breakout deck of the weekend. Lexi as well. We've seen Lexi pop into top 8s here and there over the last year, and I think maybe she'll be more of a mainstay now with all the Ranger support. And then the last like spicy appearance in the top 8 was Sam Dando on Uzuri. I think some people were surprised to see that. I was kind of excited and frightened to see the assassin like make it so high up in the tournament because I had no reps into it at all. And I was kind of thankful I didn't have to play against it, but it was really cool to see it performing so well.
Yeah, it was great to see that just the diversity. I don't think that's going to last. That's just my opinion. People are going to have, conflicting opinions for sure. But, I just recorded yesterday with Logan and Charmer on Flesh and Pod, and it's actually published right now. I do recommend people go take a look at it. We had a silly conversation, but we did actually talk intelligently about certain things. And one was the meta. And what I said was, I think things naturally kind of bubble down to a triangle with like one outlier dark horse. And I'm wondering if you agree with that assessment, wherein this is the first event, so everybody's trying new things and nobody has a grasp of what the meta is. So you're going to have some heroes that catch people by surprise. I think that for me, what people were relying on was that Dromai was going to beat the Azaleas. And I don't know if the Dromai players were just not building their decks correctly, whether those Dromai players were finding bad matchups early and the Azaleas bubbled up and they kind of were pared down and then they just kind of got brutalized, or whether Dromai is just a pipe dream. So I want to ask what your thoughts are on Dromai specifically, because like you said, it was the most present hero. It was the most represented at 15. Azalea was second at 14. So clearly people are kind of envisioning this as Azalea's top dog, but Dromai is there to keep it in check. So do you agree with that? Or do you envision a different kind of triangle with an outlier, a dark horse, or what do you expect to see at Worlds, let's say?
I think several of the things you said are true, where Dromai can be a counter to the Rangers, but I think that with all the new tools, that matchup is a lot closer than it used to be, and it does really depend on the Dromai build. So I think maybe some of the Dromai builds that showed up this weekend, while they were competing with the Rangers and there were close games, the builds weren't optimized yet to counter them properly, and they were probably more teched for the previous meta before Outsiders. And so I think the Dromai builds will kind of adapt to the presence of Ranger more and get better at beating it as the tournaments go on. And so maybe we'll see Dromai make it farther up into the top tables. I definitely think that it is something that could be that could provide some counterplay to Ranger, since like we might be potentially entering an era where there's Ranger dominance, and like I don't know for sure if it's necessarily going to be like the boogeyman, but you could call it the deck to beat right now. So yeah, I'm not sure what happened this weekend. I didn't personally play against any Dromais, but I suspect it mostly has to do with just the set is brand new and people haven't fully figured out where they want their list to be in order to target that matchup.
I hear you on that. Sounds good. The other aspect here I want to dig into real quick is your competitive career, because you've amassed quite the laundry list of accolades, as it were, already. But you're still young, and this is not in any way an indictment on you or anything. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You're 17. A lot of the players who are out there, the demographic of the players playing this game is typically in like the 20s, 30s range and whatnot. You have so much ahead of you, not just in card games, but in life. Frankly, it's just the fact of the matter. You're still in school. You're still, your education is very important to you and such, but putting in so much work into this. Now, eventually there's going to be a kind of a decision to make as the responsibilities begin to grow, as you go into, higher education and such like that. Have you given a thought about how this balance of your career is going to look like? Do you have an ideal snapshot of what your card game career is going to look like and where everything else kind of fits in? It's a big question. I understand that. When I was 17, I had to decide what my higher education and like basically my career path was going to look like. And that's a very daunting thing to consider, because at the time I'm like, I'm 17, I live at home. I work at Walmart or whatnot. Like, what the hell am I supposed to do to consider what the next 30 plus years of my life is going to look like? That is a very intimidating thing to digest. But card games, which I loved at the time, immensely, were never an option as a career, because I wasn't winning tournaments. I wasn't winning money. I didn't have that kind of, that kind of prowess, but you do. So what to you is that ideal career look like, and where does card gaming fit into for you?
This question is something that I have thought about a lot. Like you said, it's sort of intimidating, and I definitely don't have it figured out at all. But I know for sure that I want to keep playing Flesh and Blood and keep putting as much time as possible into Flesh and Blood and competing as much as I can. And that is kind of the center of my life right now, and I'm building everything around it. Still prioritizing like school and learning and figuring out the future around that. But that's like the driving like item of focus for me. I'm not sure what I want to do as far as making a living and how much I can build a career around the FAB playing. My goal right now is just that Flesh and Blood can pay for itself and be a hobby that I can enjoy without it being an active money sink. And anything I can get on top of that is great and is extra. And I'm curious how much like things I can do to build like extra income on top of that, kind of in the same scene, like in the card game world. There's also the balance that we touched on earlier of like, how much do you want your hobby to become work? And like walking the line of like, you don't ever want it to feel like a job if that starts to like pull away from the passion of it. It's very important to me that it's like, right now it's just something that I'm doing because I absolutely love it. And I never want that to be bogged down by like too much, I guess, like reliance on it for a living. So I don't know. I've also considered like board and card game design is something that interests me a lot. And I think one of my ideal career paths would be board game designer, which is kind of in like a parallel space and is obviously still tabletop gaming. So like my main answer to this question is I'm not sure yet, but I'm definitely looking for ways to make Flesh and Blood more self-sustaining and ultimately just keep playing it the amount that I am right now for all of the foreseeable future.
Well, I'll tell you this, like when I got into university, I applied for broadcast journalism and I was denied. I was rejected, believe it or not. And I ended up going into political science. I ended up disliking it early. I dropped out. I bartended for 3 or 4 years, and then I went back to school and I finished my degree in political science. And that diploma lives in a frame in a drawer at my parents' house, because when I got it, I was like, I am never doing anything within this space. And here I am. And, and like I graduated late. Like I think I was 28, I think, when I got my university degree. So there's no rush. And that's the thing, is like the pressure that is put on you to make decisions this early don't matter, because you are constantly changing. Who I was when I got into school, who I was when I dropped out, and who I was when I graduated, and who I am today are all different versions of myself. And that's the one thing, because I know a lot of people, you are widely beloved by the entire community. And a lot of people are going to say, you know what, Brodie, never change. But if you don't change, then you're not growing and you're not improving. So don't ever feel like you have to be making these decisions now, and don't ever feel like the decisions you make are final. There never are. So, my man, I think that you have the equipment set to blast through the next 10 years, wherein if you ever just say like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to do this, it's within you to succeed at that. So and we're all rooting for you, man. So I don't think that you have to worry about it for quite a while. So enjoy the ride, man. Just enjoy the ride. You didn't have to live through 80s fashion. So don't even have to worry about it. Or 2000s fashion. That was the worst. 2000s fashion was garbage. Don't look at how baggy our clothes were in the 2000s, dude. Don't do that.
Don't look it up. Don't even look into it.
Don't even look into it. 90s, the best. The 90s were the best era ever. And one day, Brodie, like when we're at a tournament and we're out for dinner, I'm going to tell you all about the 90s. And you're going to tell me to shut the hell up. But I won't, because it was the best. It was absolutely the best. So with that in mind, you're obviously not going to slow down. You love cards. You love competing. You love the events. You're going to continue doing that. I want to ask you about how it feels to be traveling so much, and not only traveling so much, but also traveling kind of like on your own now, because every time that I've been to these major events, I've had the pleasure of seeing your mother and hanging out and talking to her. And she's an awesome person, very supportive. But now you're kind of out there doing your own thing, I think. So is it a different feeling now? Like, how does it feel to just attend these tournaments and just, go to town and go to work and have a good time?
It's definitely been like a little bit scary, or just like a change to be going to some of the stuff without my mom. Like the first time I ever like just got on a flight by myself was earlier, like within the last year. But it's fun too. I think like it's cool to kind of be growing up, I guess, and just venturing out and doing some of this on my own. But my mom still comes with me to a lot of the events, and I really appreciate her like supporting me and also playing Flesh and Blood as well. She like comes along and has a good time with everyone. She even played in Charlotte. I believe it was Battle Hardened Charlotte. She played the whole thing with Fi. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, like getting her into the game. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely like an adventure, just going out on my own and getting more and more independent, while also like having my mom like help me through that.
Just so you know, this is a completely true thing. You're 17, I'm 37. I got 20 years on you. My mom still texts me this morning. She texted me to show me hold on a second, to show me the deals and the what is on sale at the grocery store. So you never escape it. And that's a good thing. And because a lot of people might not have that kind of support, but I still get text messages, and people who watch my stream, they'll say like, "Oh, it's Tuesday. It's your mom's going to text you to see if you want a lasagna from the Italian place across the street." So I still get, as you can see here, the flyer is from the grocery store, and she's like, "Yep, this is what's on sale. So go, if you're hungry, go pick up some stuff. I did the research for you." That kind of support doesn't go away, Brodie. So get used to it, buddy. The fact that your mom also plays cards is just so damn cool. That's just so awesome. That said, outside of cards, is there a career particularly that interests you, or something that you want to pursue? You mentioned that if this might not be your main source of income, let's say, like you want to actually go down a different route career-wise and maybe do this kind of on the side. Do you have that kind of idea in your mind of a direction that you want to go?
Definitely still figuring it out and unsure. But the main thing that I am passionate about outside of playing card games is designing tabletop games. Like I think my ideal career path, just as far as what I would really be passionate about doing, is making board games. And I've been doing that ever since I was little, just around the house, like cutting up sheets of paper, making up these little cards. I've always also really enjoyed writing the rule books. Like I for some reason it just tickles my brain to have these cards in card or board games with like niche interactions, and then going and like writing down all of the like clarifications for niche interactions. just like that kind of stuff is really fun to me. So like something in the tabletop space is definitely what I would like to do as a career, but I'm still open to other things and still just kind of like exploring different options. I do not have any set in stone plans yet. I'm thankful that I have a little bit more time, or also like a lot of time, but like at least a little bit more time before I have to start making at least initial decisions and diving into something.
Last thing I want to dive into is Codex of Frailty, because it's been in the spotlight for a long time. And by a long time, I mean not a long time, because the card just hit the scene and people are already, banging on the door with their pitchforks and torches to say, like, what the hell, dude? One of the more ridiculous things I read was when somebody asked Brian Gottlieb if he even read the card. And and I get it. It's an emotional thing when a new card that is definitely above rate maybe loses you a game or loses you a pivotal turn or does some nasty shenanigans on you. I want to ask your opinion of the card before I kind of, give you my little piece.
Yeah, so I of course got to play with this card this weekend in my deck, and I do think it's incredibly strong. I think it's one of, if not the strongest, like non-equipment cards in the game. And assuming that you're able to set up your turn, or like build your deck with the intention of playing it on an empty hand and essentially getting like a 2-for-1 with some added value, it is very, very, very powerful. I think it's too early to say whether it is making the decks that it's played in too strong or anything like that, or to like claim that it is like a toxic impact on the format. I don't really have any strong opinions yet. I definitely think the card is powerful, but I really just want to give it time. I think there's counterplay to it. I think you can make different arguments about like what is healthy in a card, and like whether it's good that these classes that hadn't been performing as well have now this really powerful tool to do better, or bad that it's so above rate compared to other things. And I think ultimately I'm just going to leave it to the developers to watch the meta play out and make their decisions on where they want to go from here. But yeah, basically my take is it's definitely a very strong card, but I like don't necessarily mind it being in the format, and I'm just like still trying to figure everything out along with everyone else, just like seeing where it lines up in the meta.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Again, it's still very early, and I'm definitely not somebody of the ilk to immediately go down the route of just telling somebody, well, just get good. Like, that is an irresponsible response to those kinds of things of like, hey, this card is really strong or blah, blah, blah. Well, get good. That's not the right approach to this. However, in the 48 hours that this card has been had existed competitively, people were already calling for its head. And I think that is an overreaction in itself. So the problem for me is like, why is it that this card is suddenly the boogeyman for a class that hasn't had any, or a hero that hasn't had anything really going for it for a long time, to suddenly get a powerful piece, and ultimately people are losing their minds? Whereas, why aren't people going crazy over a card like Aether Wildfire that basically wins you the game? It's a Majestic that wins you the game if you line it up properly, in the same way that Codex of Frailty might not have the same crazy amount of setup, but the reach of it is significantly less than Aether Wildfire. I just feel like people are kind of overreacting to a very strong card. And that's what it is. It is a very strong card. It is a coveted card. It is a desired card. It helps a class that has been in the dumpster for years, to help a hero that has been floundering for years become relevant and become powerful. And I think that maybe people are a little bit more irked by it, because Azalea didn't go from like tier D to tier B or tier A even. It catapulted that hero practically to the stratosphere. And obviously cards like Premeditate and a lot of the arrows that she got were great too. But let's be real, it's not just that Codex of Frailty does great things and really peels a card away. It gives you more opportunity. It allows you to do things like play Red in the Ledger again. for like, you can play that card 6 times if you wanted to, if everything goes right. But at the same time, I was having this conversation with people like Charmer and Logan yesterday, where why not play? I forgot what the card is called from Outsider, but why not just play the copy of the card that allows you to block from Arsenal, so that you can get that Arsenal card back and block with it. So it is helpful. So part of it, I think, is just that people haven't had the amount of time to truly understand how to play, not necessarily play around it, but how to counteract it, how to survive it. It isn't a game-winning card, I think. It's just a strong card. But we've seen those kinds of strong cards with things like Crippling Crush and, Oakenold and other kinds of very powerful cards that kind of go way over the top and almost time walk your opponent to the degree where your turn is going to be so bad that I'm just going to have another free go at this. Do you think that people are going to come down a little bit on this once the outrage kind of, peters out? Or do you think that this is going to be sustained or even grow in terms of people's calling for this card to be addressed?
I think maybe both. I think it's definitely understandable that people see something like this and are kind of shocked by it, and it's something brand new, and they are just like unsure of what it's going to mean for the game, or if it's going to create unfun play experiences. I think all of that is very reasonable to like have those initial impressions. I think that as time goes on, we'll get to see how much like counterplay there is to Rangers and Assassins in general. I definitely think there are other decks in the meta that can counter Ranger and push it back down. And I think as far as like meta share and hero dominance, I don't think that Codex is going to cause Azalea or Lexi or the Assassins to be like oppressive decks by any means. So I think as time goes on, things will balance out more. But I also think maybe people will continue to express feelings that it's just inherently as a card is so much better than other cards that they don't like it for that reason. And I think it's okay for that to be a debate and something that is like talked about. And ultimately, I think it's just up to the developers to decide what they want for the game and what's going to make the best play experience. And they'll look at the data and decide where to go from here.
Sounds good. And I know that you wanted to go ahead and drop some shout outs and throw some dap around to people and players that deserve it. So I'm going to give you this opportunity here before we kind of sign off on the episode, my friend, to go ahead and hit out all the shout outs, because you had mentioned that before we even started recording, which for everybody listening is, again, just pure Brodie, where he wants to deflect all the praise to other people. But this is your opportunity, dude.
Yeah, so first shout out goes to my team, the Wolfpack, for helping me prep for this event and for just being great, being there for me and like asking, like not all of them, of course, we're going to Chicago. Most of us didn't go, but everyone who wasn't was like, what do you guys need? What can we do to help you prepare? So just thanks to them for being great. Special thank you to my friend Dave Lynn on the team for putting a ton of work into this Azalea deck. And the whole time where I was flip-flopping between heroes, he was mostly just getting reps on Azalea. So at the last second, when I decided to pivot, I just basically called him up and was like, give me all the knowledge. I'll try to absorb it. So he did a lot to get me ready for this event. Also, shout out to Levi for, first of all, being just an awesome guy. Every time I've ever had a question about Azalea, I ask Levi, I'm like, Levi, what in the world do I do against Azalea? Or this weekend, it was as Azalea. I'm not familiar enough with this hero. And he's so friendly and open, sharing his thoughts and just wants to talk about Flesh and Blood. And I owe him a lot of my success, just like telling me different things to keep in mind when I'm playing the deck and sharing his expertise. And also my deck list is based off of his, and the bulk of it is just his same core. So thanks to him for sharing that. He shares that publicly. That's one of my favorite things about Levi is he just like wants to share his findings with the community, and is kind of like like you mentioned, like a leader of the Azalea crowd. And then shout out as well to my mom for always supporting me in Flesh and Blood and just being there and basically like treating this like I treat it, like a really like kind of like a competitive sport. Like some parents will, let their kids play select tennis and travel for that. Like she sees it as something that is really a passion and not like a game distracting me from my studies, which I know is something that other card game players might have with their parents. So just thank you for her to like taking it seriously and letting me chase it.
Well said, my friend. There you have it. That is a Brodie Spurlock, the winner of the Chicago Brawl, plus like 40,000 other tournaments. So congratulations to you. What a lot of people don't understand is that when we were trying to lock down a time to do this interview, he's like, yeah, you got to play around my my armory attendance. So this kid does not slow down. And just for people who might not know, how many armories do you play a week?
So if I'm not traveling to any other tournaments, I try to go to 7 armories in a week.
You psycho. Like, listen, like you can do it. I'm not saying you can't, but holy Moses, kid. Like, you just won a big tournament. You can throttle down for a bit. Like, go have a bowl of Cheerios and just chill on the couch, man. Like, that's what I do when I get home. I'm like, yeah, baby. I'm like, I got cookies to eat. But no, you are all business, and it's good to see, dude. Your success is abundant, but you still got easily like another 30 years to just rack it up, man. So congratulations on your win, on all your success. And for those who might want to, follow you along, what's the best way to sort of keep tabs on Brodie Spurlock?
The best place to find me is on Twitter at Brodie Spurlock. That's pretty much the only social media I have right now. So yeah, you can give me a follow there.
And yeah, and I guess if you see him at the tournament, he's like the nicest guy. He's the guy with the grocery bag with big thing of Wonder Bread on there. So for those who are listening, thank you kindly so much again to our sponsors, FAB Cards. You can go to kfabcards.com, as well as BCW Supplies. Use the code ISP10 if you want to go get some discounts on all of your protective stuff, your sleeves, your deck boxes and stuff. That's what I use, BCW Supplies. They've been very good, and I love all of their products, as well as to our Patreon subscribers. You guys rock on. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, you are going to get to hear Brodie in the uncensored, unhinged, off the rails, go again segment. I don't know. I'm not going to try to tempt you into doing some stupid stuff, but I'm sure you've got some great stories to tell, as we got a lot of listener questions that we got to get to. So for all those, if you do want to listen to the go again segment, you can become a Patreon tier 2 plus supporter and get all the bonus content. There's tons there. So I do appreciate you. For everyone else, thank you for listening. Don't forget, you're not losing if you're learning. Catch us next week on ISP. Well,